Hey, everybody, and welcome to the Payoff Pitch. I'm Chris Steele, joined by James Vecchio. And this week, we're going to be weighing in on some of the most interesting things going on around fantasy baseball. The thing that's caught my attention most, James, is you have to take one side in this argument right away. Are you taking the Coors cat or the Yankees cat?
Easy answer for me as a cat lover. I'm going to go with the Coors cat. I like Wild and Feral when they're out there on the field, so that one's kind of got the right vision for me. So Coors cat all the way.
Oh, I'm definitely Yankees cat. Yankees cat is more put together. It looks like Coors cat's seen some shit.
Yeah, that's true, but I like Coors cat because Coors cat is, an underdog. True rags to riches story. Yankees cat, it's like a Yankees fan. It's been there, it's done that before, knows how to go home. It's whatever.
I like that they kind of fit the profile, though. The Yankees cat looks like a Yankees cat, and the Coors cat looks like a Coors cat. Like, you would think that maybe, like, Charlie Blackmon sleeps underneath the stands at night and doesn't go home, and that might be his cat. And it makes sense. They look alike.
It's true. The Coors cat kind of feels like probably a lot of Rockies fans, which are like, I've seen some things. They haven't been good. We won a one-game playoff once, but that's about all I remember.
Well, and one player that has looked haggard and now looks pretty pristine to me is Austin Riley. Has been outstanding here of late. It seemed like the Braves didn't actually believe in him. They kept stacking up all these bums ready to take over his job at any given moment with Pablo Sandoval and then Jake Lamb. They were just waiting to give away this job. He's been red hot since the midseason break. Are you buying this guy, or is he going to crash back to earth and burn hard?
I kind of feel like I'm somewhere in the middle. I definitely think he's better than what he was in his age 22 and age 23 seasons. He, was 22 and 23 on teams that were contending and had a lot of start and stops. Why? Because when he wasn't good, they needed to get somebody in who was good because they were actually trying to win ball games. They finally gave him the reins in the sense that if he stunk this year, they were moving on, and he didn't stink. He's been good. He's been very good. He's got like a 375 on base percentage. He's slugging very well. He's going to easily have 25, 30 homers this season. He looks like someone I believe in as a major league starter, but do I think he's going to hold that 375 on base percentage going forward year after year? No. It's probably on the high end of what he's going to do on average for the rest of his career. And same thing with the homers. He's probably going to be a 22, 30 guy and probably going to be closer to 20, which, is fine. It's not bad, but I think, with a lot of breakouts, it's always like, oh, look what he just did. He's now a good guy. Could he become a superstar guy? And as we all know, superstars are just rare. Austin Riley can just be a very solid player for a very long time and never really eclipse being anything more than that. And that's kind of where I fall with him. I think he'll be very fine. He'll eventually move down that defensive, progression, kind of become a first baseman only guy, not really be a third baseman in time. And a Miguel Sano type career path is kind of what I would see. Someone who's going to have some pop, have some nice seasons, but, when the pitchers finally make one adjustment that he can't adjust back to, it's going to probably get kind of ugly. But that might be in 7 years. And in 7 years, he'll be a very good player. So kind of who cares? So I guess I'm in the middle. I'm buying and I'm selling.
Abraham Toro Hernandez is the first player in Major League history to hit a home run for one team and then hit a home run against that team in the next game. I think it was kind of a shock that he got traded. Is this somebody to be interested in, or is he just a statistical anomaly here?
I like him short term. He's definitely someone who you think can replace Kyle Seager and kind of be there for a while. And I think he's someone who can play second right now and be there for a while. Dylan Moore has not hit the ball well at all, and he's very much a guy who's just a utility piece who might get hot for a little bit but isn't a long-term solution. Shed Long certainly isn't a long-term solution. And while they like Ty France, I feel like they don't think Ty France should be at second base or probably even third base. They think France is the first base DH guy, which is fine, which gives Toro opportunity. And what you need is opportunity and skill in order to be good at fantasy baseball. And he's got them both. Does he have full season skill? Probably not. But I made the ad after he went hot immediately after that trade and said, you know what, let's see where this goes. And, like I say with many, many, many different players, you want to ride the hot streaks and sell the cold streaks. So in a 12-man league where you're in a redraft, go add Toro. Just ride the hot streak out. Then when he stinks, you can let him go. I've invested in Willie Adames. Why? Because I thought I was riding a hot streak. I didn't think Willie Adames was here to stay. And look, he's been here to stay. And I get to reap the benefits, not because I'm Nostradamus on Adames and I know what's going to happen, but because eventually you add a guy who you think is just going to be hot and he actually sticks around. And that's how you have to approach this game. There's no formula where it's like, I know how to identify these players who will be good. Because if you're that good at it, you don't play fantasy baseball. You work in a GM's office, and you're still not very good. So add the guys who are hot, see what happens, and if they continue to stay hot, well, you've got yourself your reward.
The Braves added two guys that aren't a huge sucking sound in the outfield, with Adam Duvall being back in Atlanta, and also adding Jorge Soler. Duvall played very well for Atlanta last year. He seems to do very well when he plays against Atlanta too. Is he kind of a low leverage ad?
Yeah, I mean, he's been kind of Adam Duvall all season, and he's going to probably continue to be Adam Duvall in Atlanta. And if anything, he should see a tick up in his production just because there'll be more RBI chances. And in theory, he'll be getting a few more good pitches to hit. But overall, yeah, he's going to hit for great pop. He's going to drive in some runs. He's going to score an adequate amount of runs. Not going to steal. And he's going to be an absolute killer in average and on base. And if you can stomach that because you need power, go for it. I'm in an on-base percentage league, and I ran Duvall for forever, and I still have him. Why? Because the rest of my team is just on-base kings, and I still win the category every week, and I can take his black hole of on-base percentage. And if you can take his black hole and the average or on-base, whatever it is in your league, then he's a great guy to have on your team. And, Jorge Soler, to segue over there, is kind of the same thing as Adam Duvall, except a little bit more on the extremes. His bad extremes are somehow worse than Adam Duvall's, and his good extremes are somehow better than Adam Duvall's. He's got like 8 homers in his past 2 weeks or something along those lines across 2 teams, and he's definitely a guy to ride when he's hot. I've made the ad on him, and I'm just sitting there going, when he cools off, I'll sell him. And until then, he's going to help me win 2 weeks, and then maybe he helps me lose 1 week, but I'll sell and move on, and 2 for 1 is a solid trade. So both of these guys are, if you need power, go grab them. If you need RBIs, can't hurt. See how well they do until they stop doing well. And that's just my simple solution.
And Jorge Soler is either really good or really bad. And Jorge Soler seems like he can't hit the way he used to. And now he has to also wear a glove, which is a train wreck when it happens. But to look back to what he did in 2019, if he could just be half of what he was in 2019 when he hit 48 home runs, that'd be a pretty good get. And maybe a change of scenery is just the thing to jumpstart a guy who needs to get back to what he was just a couple of years ago.
Yeah, and he's kind of your classic all or nothing, bad defense, power hitting outfielder / first baseman, in that you know exactly what you're going to get. You're going to get some really cold streaks where he looks just like not a major league player. And you're going to get some really hot streaks where you go, if this guy kept this up all season, he'd be one of the best players in baseball. And that's what you're paying for, and that's what you're going to get, and that's what the Braves are going to get. And they bought 2 of these guys specifically to go, hey, maybe they'll both get hot at the same time. They'll have a sustained hot streak, and we'll catch and pass the Mets. And what's going on right now? They have a sustained hot streak. What's happening? They're catching the Mets. So their plan is kind of coming into action. The only scary part is what happens when they stop being hot. But from a fantasy perspective, you don't care because you can cut bait with them and move on. And that's fine. So I recommend doing that.
Tuki Tuasant is a player that people were tripping all over themselves to get back in 2018 and 2019. He just never lived up to the expectation and the hype. He struggled to even get on the roster and has just been kind of a bullpen arm. Now he's in the rotation and he's looking like he's doing fine. Is there any reason to believe he can become the player a lot of people believed he would be? Or is this a guy who's just going to make a spot start and then go back to being who he is?
I think it's more the latter than the former. You look at a guy like Toussaint, and you know what I think of? I think of Bryce Wilson. I think of Kyle Muller. I think of Huascar Ynoa. I think of all of these Braves arms that are supposed to be great and are just kind of meh. You can throw Kobe Allard into that before he got traded. You think of Sean Newcomb. There's just so many guys who come up with these big, giant prospect status and could be the guy, have clear opportunity to fantasy success, and are just too Jekyll and Hyde. They have a great start, and then they have a terrible start. You know, it looked like he was putting it together this year. I was a clear buyer, but before that, no, I wasn't. And I'm not buying Toussaint until it's probably too late. Whenever he does put it together, if that happens, I don't think he's going to be available in my league to go add. And I'm okay with that because I want to avoid those negatives. I want to avoid those ratio-killing 2 1/3 innings pitched, 11 earned runs, 1K, 45 men reached base, just disaster starts. I'd rather go and add a Merrill Kelly, who's just not that flashy and is not that good and might not get you a win, but is also going to not destroy you. It's the long game, both when you're playing head-to-head and you're playing roto. And what you want to do is you want to avoid bad things. I'll compare it to basketball in the sense that it's not that perfect defense gets you an actual stop, but it gets you the best percentage of a stop. And making the right ad of a guy in fantasy baseball gets you the best percentage of not having a disaster. You don't want to have disasters. When you start Carlos Martinez and he has a 285 ERA, you've torqued your week. You can't get over that. I certainly did that this year, and I did not let Carlos Martinez live it down because you can't have that type of variance. And a guy like Toussaint, he's got that type of variance locked up. All season, that's all he's going to have. Maybe the end of September, I'll go, oh, I finally trust him if he hasn't blown up yet. But I just don't want to deal with that, especially coming around fantasy playoff times. I don't want to just torque my season away because I thought Touki Toussaint was going to pitch well against the Pirates, and he didn't. I don't want to touch that.
It feels like to me he's a guy who ends up being maybe a high leverage reliever, and that's where he maxes out at, is if he has everything fall into place and he starts like actually living up to his potential, maybe he could be like a poor man's Josh Hader if he's lucky.
Yeah, a career path similar to Wade Davis doesn't seem out of the question. Career path similar to Luke Hocevar also doesn't seem out of the question. And where you get one season in the bullpen that looks nice, but you also have arm injuries and ineffectiveness, and that's kind of that. And yeah, I don't think Toussaint's just that special. He seems to be able to have okay-ish length, but that's not very good, especially when you have blow-up starts mixed in. Yeah, bullpen arm makes sense, but if he becomes a bullpen arm, I don't know if he's going to go to Hader level. I think he might get to Drew Streckenrider level, which is barely fantasy relevant. So he's not on my radar anywhere. If I roster him, I'm very okay with selling him at what might be his peak value today, which isn't exactly that high, but he's not one I'm buying.
I think I've already heard you kind of weigh in on this, but is Kyle Muller kind of a thing for the Braves?
He's trying to be a thing. Do I think he will continue to be a thing long term? No. I mean, he's looked good. He's got like a 2.5 ERA. No one's kind of messed with him. Everything should be fine. His FIP kind of matches. I think that's right around 3, but like, I don't know. I just don't believe in any of these Brave starters. I loved Ian Anderson heading into the year. I still think he's great. I'm totally on board with Max Fried. I think Charlie Morton's still Charlie Morton, which is fine. But everything else, that back half, I don't see long-term success. I look at a guy like Kyle Muller, all the stats show that he's been fine and good and adequate and should continue, and maybe he will the rest of this year, but I don't see it happening. I just don't believe in his pedigree. I don't believe in his stuff. And, I don't have a true reason where I can point and go, oh, well, if you actually look at his VORP over OPS divided by wins, he's actually not that good. There's no actual stat. It's just a feeling, basically seeing how the Braves have treated their pitchers for a very long time. Even the ones who've been successful seem to flame up and then flame way down very quickly. So I kind of want to avoid it. It's a general rule of thumb. It's not anything that I can actually point to and say is actually bad, but I'm not going to be the guy buying Kyle Muller. If you are, I'm not going to tell you you're wrong because I can't point to anything, but when he eventually doesn't succeed, I'll go, yeah, I was kind of right on that, even though the odds are he's not a superstar. So I get why it's a little talking out of both sides of my mouth, but right. I can do that. It's fine.
Well, you look at the way Folty and Newcomb were treated when they had their really hot starts, and people were like, these are the next Braves that are going to be Maddox, Smoltz, and, you know, those guys coming back up. Here they are again when Folty couldn't be on a major league roster the last 2 years, and Newcomb's wherever the heck he is now.
I like that, and I also like that you think Folty in Texas is not on a major league roster because you're pretty dang close. I think he leads the league.
Newcomb, I'm not sure he's on a real roster.
Yeah, Folty's I mean, fine. Newcomb's still in that Braves organization, which kind of leads to my point of just he petered out, and since they have control over him, they're just letting him sit there, and they haven't really cashed in on his value because his cost is so good, and they're not going to sell at low value. I get that, and I just don't believe that in what the Braves are doing with their pitching. I believe in Ian Anderson so much that I like it, but everything else there, I'm just kind of hands off going, I don't really enjoy this. And that's just how I feel.
I have to keep track of where Folty is because he has ridiculous tattoos and they make me laugh every time I see him. Just the flames on his arm and then he gets absolutely destroyed. It delights me every time.
To segue off of that, another ridiculous tattoo I've noticed is Javi Baez's gigantic MLB logo right above the MLB logo on the back of his neck. And I think that that's hilariously bad and not good because it doesn't even match up size-wise. So it's like two unsized blocks on top of each other. And I know he's hit a homer today and he's looked good so far in the Mets. And I know I rant about how bad he is. God, I just don't like Javi Baez, the player. I really wish I did. I wish I loved his swag. I like the swag of a lot of players. But God, he went crazy at Richard Blyer yesterday for being happy that he got Javi to fly out. But Javi goes crazy whenever he has hits. He refuses to allow it to go both ways, and he just drives me up a wall. And watching more and more Mets games, I'm just going to grow to hate this guy. I'm not looking forward to it.
You spoke it into existence, saying that they were fine and they were going to stand pat, and then here comes Javi Baez for you.
Yeah, exactly. And what Steve Cohen said, which is they were trying to trade for a pitcher. They knew that they weren't going to get that done, and they said they owed it to the fan base and to this team to try and win. So then they decided to trade for Javi Baez, which is a very weird thing to say, which is to say we didn't get what we wanted, but we decided to get something, so we traded for Javi Baez. That's lame ducking him pretty hard, but it's also very Mets, and it's also kind of accurate in my brain.
Well, when they're throwing JD Martinez out there and they're throwing Jonathan VR, who I like Jonathan VR, but those are two guys that are clearly below the level of a Javi Baez. That's an upgrade for you. It's a win.
In theory, but I hate Javi Baez so much that I think J.D. Davis is better than Javi Baez straight up. For all the amazing defensive plays that Javi Baez does make, he makes just as many boneheaded defensive plays. For all the home runs Javi Baez hits, he strikes out that much more than the average person behind him and gets on base that much less. He's Chris Carter at shortstop. That's what he is. I can't stand the guy because I think his value is just so overinflated, and I don't believe in his defense, even though I know his range factor is great. He also makes terrible throws all the time. He gets to balls. He's not Johnny Peralta out there, but he's a mirage of all mirages, and if Cleveland went ahead and signed him, I might have to revoke my Guardian membership.
Well, one player that I'm kind of baffled by the way the Mets have used him is Michael Conforto. Michael Conforto over the last 2 seasons prior to this one has been maybe one of the most consistent top outfielders in fantasy baseball. He's not in that elite range, but he's right in that hall of very good. And so Michael Conforto's dealt with injuries this year. right now he's platooning with Kevin Pillar, and that doesn't make any sense to me when you've got other guys out in the outfield like Brandon Nimmo, who really hasn't done a whole lot for you.
I mean, I probably spoke about this with my wife about maybe like 45 minutes ago, so I can go into great detail on this because I don't understand why and how the Mets run their organization. They're clearly winning, so congrats to them. But they take analytics to the point where I think it goes too far. They play purely a math game. They look and they go, oh, Michael Conforto, he hits 167 against lefties this year, or whatever it is. Kevin Pillar hits 192 against lefties. We must play Kevin Pillar. And it's like, well, yeah, he's technically better, but Conforto has a better opportunity to hit for power or to get on a hot streak and then lead to better results against righties. Or also, is your everyday player who you're playing and is just as good defensively and not as big of a slugging percentage black hole. And they do the same thing with pitching. They refuse to let all their starters ever see the third time through, including Jacob deGrom. Well, I can give them a little bit of hindsight for saying, oh, he's been kind of hurt and we need to baby him, which I don't believe in, but I get that. But at the same time, when they take these guys out the third time through the order, what do? They bring in Drew Smith. They bring in Jacob Barnes. They bring in Miguel Castro. Are these guys that much better the first time they're facing someone than Jacob deGrom or Marcus Stroman or Taijuan Walker is the third time they're facing someone? It's baffling when someone is pitching well and they don't take that into any sort of consideration. It's, oh, they're pitching absolutely amazing and the third time is up. We'll take them out and we'll bring in a totally fresh pitcher. And to bring it full circle, it's what they're doing with Conforto. He can't hit lefties, so they refuse to play him against lefties. And the idea is he can hit lefties. He's done it before. He's not currently doing it, but he has the capability of doing it. And when your alternate option is Kevin Pillar, who also can't hit lefties, just let Conforto play. Just let it happen. And they're not doing it. And it's winning them games, so you can only criticize so much. But I don't really get what they're doing. Conforto's not a fantasy asset. He shouldn't be on your team because the Mets don't want to play him.
And it's kind of just strange. If they're taking pitchers out this early, you would expect the bullpen to be better. But when you're throwing out Seth Lugo out there, Trevor May's been very good this year. But the rest of that bullpen is just kind of a, I guess, kind of situation.
Yeah, and I mean, when you say Trevor May's been very good this year, he's got a 3.29 ERA, which, of course, I know, reliever ERA, but he's got a 3.6 FIP. He's got a 1.3 WHIP. That's not very good. That's adequate. He's got high strikeout numbers. I understand that, but that's your best reliever who's not Edwin Diaz? You don't have that great of a relieving core. Yeah, Aaron Whoop's been great against lefties, so I'll give you that, but when you're trying to extend the game by having all these relievers pitch, and they're not very good, why don't you have your good starter pitch the third time through? Just see what happens. Just see. Because I know the statistics are terrible for starters the third time through, but that's all starters. That's bad pitchers and good pitchers who start games. When you're looking at good pitchers who start games, those statistics get better. Why? Because they're good pitchers. Not because it's the third time through, but because good pitchers pitch well all the time. It's perplexing how much statistics have come in, and they are, by and large, definitive rules that cannot be broken. It's not you play to manage the players you have. It's third time through is bad. They cannot face third times through. End of discussion. You can't adjust in-game. It's like managing has disappeared intentionally because they think statistics can outweigh exact circumstances that are happening in real time. And while the statistics obviously are excellent at helping you guide through an idea and a thought process, being able to manage real time is what caused the Rays to lose the World Series, and it's what causes a lot of teams to just make poor in-game decisions because they're not making in-game decisions. They're making pre-game decisions.
Well, watching Kevin Pillar get hit in the face is delightful for me because I've heard how much of a bag he can be, and so I'm fine with him playing every once in a while if that's the end result. But talking about a player who actually had to overcome some stuff after an injury, Carlos Carrasco was a really good feel-good story. But at the same time, I just don't feel like you can trust him for fantasy baseball purposes because of his injury history, even before he comes back from everything that he had to deal with. So Carlos Carrasco is actually back on the mound now, competing. Is this a guy that people are going to look at and pick up just because they understand the name and they recognize who he is? Or is this a name that everybody should just leave on the waiver wire right now?
I think the answer to the question is both. I think people are going to see that name and go, ooh, I know Carlos Carrasco. He pitches well. Let me get him on my team. He's pitching for the Mets, their first place team. Things should go relatively well here. The Mets are one of the best pitching teams in baseball. So my long rant aside, they're clearly doing things well. Well, then you think about it deeper and you look beyond the numbers and you go, they're not going to extend Carlos Carrasco. He went 4 innings in his first start despite looking great. And he's not going to get the opportunity to get a win very often. So you're going to get some solid innings, which are nice. But at this time of the year, you don't want starters who go 4 innings. Those guys are pretty valueless to you because racking up innings doesn't really matter unless you're way behind and you had a ton of injuries and that's just team specific in a roto league. In an average league, I don't want Carrasco because he's not going to net me those wins. He's going to not net me Ks because he's not going to go deep. His ratios should be good, but they also could totally not be good well. And also, if he blows up at all, he doesn't have the amount of volume to cover that blow up. So I'm just kind of out on him. I don't want him. Frankly, this time of year, I don't want anyone who's injured. I've got Ian Anderson on a lot of my teams to segue back there, and I'm very lukewarm about what I'm going to do with him when he comes back. I know it's just a redraft league, so I can cut him with ease, but I don't know what they're going to do with him. I don't know how they're going to treat him. You know, you see a guy like Dinelson Lamet for the Padres. All season, he's been invisible because they just don't want to give him innings, and he's been useless despite pitching fairly well. And I think Carrasco could just be another Dinelson Lamet. You got to remember, it's modern baseball where wins and losses don't matter. What inning you pitch doesn't matter. How long you pitch kind of doesn't matter. And in fantasy, all those things matter. So you got to look at Carrasco with the context of what's happening. And I'm just taking a step back and going, not someone I'm going to take the test on, lock up a roster spot, and just wait and see what happens. Someone else can do that. I want action now. I want production now. I don't want to wait. So no Carrasco for me.
And you made a comparison earlier that you could just go out and get somebody who's fine in like a Merrill Kelly and be better off in a certain circumstance. Taylor Miguel kind of looks like he could be that kind of player as well. A player who can just be fine and do well enough for you to just put out some innings and maybe just get you through a week.
Yeah, you know, he's honestly been better than just fine so far. He's been very solid. And, of course, everyone's expecting the other shoe to fall off because he's got like a 2.5 ERA across like 8 starts. Mm-hmm. But you know what? Maybe that other shoe doesn't entirely fall off. Maybe he just changes his pairs of shoes and you get one bad start. And, yeah, you can find a Tyler McGill. Look at the former great Mets legend, Matt Harvey, who suddenly showed up with like 18 straight scoreless innings going into tonight. Right. You know, he's not great. He's not anyone I trust at all, but you can find players like that and just ride them. You don't win fantasy championships based off of mid-round draft picks and late season additions becoming these long-term plays. That's just not how baseball works. You don't add a guy in the middle of July or the start of August and you ride him to the championship. That they're not available. Those players who you could ride are already good and already on a roster. The only players who could fall into that category are guys activated off the injured list. But again, with the way pitchers work, it's just unlikely they're going to see any volume. So what do? You ride the hot hand. If you add Matt Harvey and you say, let's roll with this, I'm not going to blame you. Maybe he found something. He's done it before. It was like 5 years ago, but can he put together a month-and-a-half stretch? I don't know. Maybe it's less than that. But if he gives you another 3 great weeks and gets you to the playoffs, well, that's a really good investment. It's not about finding these long values. I know it's a huge thing that I'm always harping on. You need to find production today, and when you don't have that production tomorrow, then you go find production today when it is tomorrow. That's just how you play the game. I've added Jonathan Scoop. I know I've talked about this multiple times. He's not good at baseball. Like we all know what he is. He can't get on base. He hits for some power, and he gets hot. And you know what? He's been hot for a really long time. And why? I don't know. I can't predict these things, but you ride the hot hand. You find hot hands and you ride them. That's how you play this game. You don't sit on Hunter Dozier all season waiting for him to come around because he's not that good. He's better than what he's performed, clearly, but he's not someone you wait around. Waiting loses. Getting good production wins. That's just how it works.
Right. And I think when it comes to somebody like Matt Harvey, he may have less strikeouts in his career than times fantasy baseball players were like, he's back, let's add him.
It's completely true, and it's why he's never going to see any of my rosters, and I'm going to let him be somebody else. But, eventually, he might put together enough quality starts here where you go, not only is he going to be back, he already is back. He somehow has returned out of nowhere. He figured it out. Or he's going to blow up. But regardless, the opportunity is there, and he's got enough recent evidence to go and give it a shot. You're not adding 14.73 ERA Matt Harvey. You're adding a guy who's 18 straight scoreless innings Matt Harvey. So if he blows up on that, you can go, well, at least there was a little bit of evidence. I'm still going to say no, but my overarching point remains. You want to add current production because you want to win, and figuring out what's going to happen tomorrow is too complex of a math equation. Just figure out what's happening today.
And the old argument of keep, cut, extend with
Did we lose you, Chris? Are you there? Can you hear me? Because you're coming in and out.
Okay, I think we're back. But that argument of DeGrom and Harvey and Syndergaard, it looks silly when just a few years ago that was a hot topic of which of those guys is going to end up being the best.
Yeah, it does look silly because it's clearly DeGrom right now. And if anyone asked that question today to a 12-year-old baseball fan, they'd be like, why are you including Matt Harvey? What type of joke is this? And the reality is that's how fast baseball happens. For people our age, Chris, we all remember how unbelievably dominant and good Matt Harvey was and how it wasn't theoretical that he could be so good. He was so good. And right now, there's some pitcher out there who's being that dominant who we will look back on 2 and 3 years from now and go, what? He was good? Why was he good? It might be a guy like Anthony Desclafani. It might be Tyler McGill. It might be, I don't know. But the point is understanding that type of player, the Matt Harvey sensation to disaster, always happens. It's not it's a once in a lifetime thing. No, it's always in the process of happening. Before Matt Harvey, there were 15 Matt Harveys. After Matt Harvey, there's going to be 15 more. They're going to keep happening over and over again. And being aware of what happens is just key. Understanding that when someone loses it, it's not crazy. It's not something you have to sit there and hold on to for forever. It's knowing this does happen to someone. It's currently happening here. Time to cut bait. Remember Mike Fulton-Navich? He was pretty dang good, and he lost it a lot faster than Matt Harvey did. Remember Kyle Freeland dominating Colorado, looking like a Cy Young potential winner, and now he barely is in the rotation of a rebuilding team? Life comes at everyone fast, and no one here who's playing fantasy baseball today is saying we need to hold on to Mike Fulton-Navich, we need to hold on to Kyle Freeman. But at some point, there were people saying that, and whoever got off that train fastest gained the most opportunity to benefit the rewards. And it's always important to just remember the past, because the past always repeats itself, even in fantasy baseball.
I think it's just pitching more than anything that is just the silliest thing where nothing really matters and the weirdest stuff can happen because we're looking at guys from just like even a few years ago that we're like, he's going to be fantastic. He might be on a career path to be in the Hall of Fame. And then you've got somebody like Anthony Discalifani, who just like even 2 or 3 years ago, you're like, he's going to be lucky to hold down a rotation spot. If he does, that's going to be super cool and it's going to help my team out. And now he's one of those guys that's not elite, but he's right in that next group and he's really solid and you know what you're going to get with him.
Yeah, exactly. And, it's unfortunate he just went on the IL. And to segue off of that a little bit is to go back to your main overarching point. Look at Tyler Glasnow. He went from being a horrendously busted prospect who everyone thought was just a useless quad A filler guy, getting traded, becoming a superstar, and now he needs Tommy John and just has Tommy John. And you know where he falls on my radar in a dynasty league? I don't want to touch the guy. I'm selling him for whatever I can right now. Now, I understand that players come back from Tommy John more often than not, and sometimes they come back elite. You think of a guy like Chris Carpenter. Think of Adam Wainwright. Those are just two Cardinals off the top of my head. And I'm sure there are more. But you know what I don't want to do? Is I don't want to wait because what's going to happen to Tyler Glasnow is what happened to Mike Clevenger, which is what's Mike Clevenger's value right now? If you're in a dynasty league and you're trying to trade for him, he's not going at all for a pretty penny. And he's going to come back next year. He might be back into that rotation. And it's going to be the same thing I said preseason, which is they have so many arms, we don't know what they're going to do with it. Yeah. And you think the Rays are just going to extend Tyler Glasnow deep into games? I think he's just going to come back from Tommy John and they're like, oh, yeah, you're a 6-inning plus guy. It's the Rays. There's no chance that's going to happen. You have no idea what's going on with this guy. He's a humongous sell because that's what happens. Sell what people remember, which is good Tyler Glasnow, and then buy what's going to happen in the future, which is unpredictable Tyler Glasnow. Get him off your team and do exactly what you would do with Anthony Desclafani. Add him while he's producing. It's good, but if he's not producing, you can cut him. And Tyler Glasnow, he's not producing, so you can cut him in the sense of his future value.
One value we know is good is one of our sponsors for tonight, Yard Barbers. I hate spending those long summer days doing yard work. We have just the solution, Yard Barbers LLC. Yard Barbers LLC is a local full-service lawn care company looking to provide the Quad Cities with quality and affordable outdoor services. Don't wait and fall to the back of the line. Contact Yard Barbers right now for a free yard evaluation and estimates. Find Yard Barbers on Facebook at Yard Barbers LLC or send them an email at yardbarbersqc@gmail.com. And when you're talking about guys coming back from injury, James, you look at somebody like Chris Sale right now, who's on the precipice of actually making his way back to the major league roster. And he has a delivery that always made it seem like this guy's arm is going to fall off. And then it finally did. And now with him coming back, you just have to wonder if now that he's had that first arm injury, are more going to follow? Or can he go back to being Chris Sale, who's one of the top 5 pitchers in all of baseball?
Yeah, that's definitely a big question. And, I don't buy him going back to being a top 5 pitcher. And the answer is obvious. It's really hard to be a top 5 pitcher. It's just not likely to happen. It's not because, he can't come back from Tommy John or, no one comes back from Tommy John. People do. We just talked about it. Chris Carpenter, Adam Wainwright. But you know what also happens? You get guys like Tim Lincecum who age and then they fall apart because they throw weird. Then you also have guys who are aging perfectly well, even though they throw weird and pitch forever. Look at a guy like Darren O'Day, who throws weird and can't ever not be aging well. R.A. Dickey, who threw weird and pitches well. I know that that's a different thing and it's velocity, and I'm just coming up with examples off the top of my head. Right. But the point remains, you don't want to invest in a guy coming off of Tommy John with the expectation that he's going to be very, very good. You want to invest in a guy coming off of Tommy John going, well, this is a lottery ticket. I hope it works out well. That's all you do. I drafted Noah Syndergaard in multiple leagues thinking, lottery ticket, he could come back in July. This could work out really well. It hasn't. You cut bait and you go, well, it doesn't work. I drafted Framber Valdez in a lot of leagues thinking, He might come back in July and things could work out really well. And it has. And that's the game that you play. Chris Sale's about to come back in August. It's been a little bit later. You may be sitting on him and using up an IL slot all season on this guy, and he might come back and he might pitch fine. And then what are you doing? You're too invested in Chris Sale. You're not going to cut him if he's throwing up a low 4s, high 3 ERA and is having some blow-ups and not going deep in some games, and then also showing you some signs of life. You don't want to be the guy who buys a guy during the comeback because you know you can't wait out and not have it happen. You can't cut Chris Sale in September when you've held him all season and you've seen the signs that he could be back. You have to ride it out. And you know what's better? Just finding someone good. Getting that opportunity to just add and subtract and add and subtract and add and subtract. And finally, you've added Taijuan Walker or you've added Kyle Gibson. And you don't have to do those add and subtractions, and you've had all that production that's already happened. It's a long-winded diatribe to go back to my main point again, which is, yeah, Chris Sale could come back, but how long? Is it going to come back immediately? It's just not likely. And are you willing to wait it out? I'm not.
And you look at Team USA Baseball, and this week pitching for them is Scott Kazmir, who kind of fits right in with your point. Is Scott Kazmir ruled the world at one point, then he had his Tommy John surgery, and then after that, he was a guy.
Yeah, and he had a few seasons as a guy that were almost not as a guy-like. They might have been actually as something good. But you know what? He never came back and was that dominant performer again. And the reason? Well, maybe it was Tommy John, or maybe it was just because Scott Kazmir, that one dominant season he had, wasn't actually like his ceiling. It was a lot of luck factor, and he put everything together, and the league didn't see him. But once they got the film on him, he just wasn't that amazing pitcher. That's okay. And we know that's not the case with Chris Sale, but what we do know is possibility is he might not be back right away. And what are you prepared to do when that happens? Are you just going to cut him? Because I don't think you are, and then you've got a sunk cost on your roster that you can't do anything with. And that's the frustration of this game. It's knowing it's okay to let people go, especially in non-dynasty leagues. Obviously, in a dynasty league, if you've got him locked up long-term, you want to hold him longer, but you also want to hope you have a bench to deal with it, because if you don't, you just put yourself in a situation where you're not playing the game. You're just waiting for stats to happen.
Where does that put you on Shane Bieber then, as someone who's a Cleveland fan?
For the current season, I see no reason to believe that Shane Bieber is going to come back and do anything. Right. Cleveland's throwing in the towel. Sure, he could come back and be healthy. Sure, he might pitch well when he's healthy. Sure, he might get you another 5 starts at the end of the season to help you dominate, win a championship. Those are all possibilities. But all of the evidence suggests that that's not what's going to happen. It's like when you look at fantasy football, you go, well, it's possible Trey Lance is the #1 overall quarterback next year. He's got the skill set to make it happen. But there's other people playing the game, and there's other incentives out there, and it's just not likely to happen. You bet on likely outcomes. Anyone on the injured list today, I'm not at all interested in. Someone dumped Aaron Savali in a league I'm in, and I have an extra injured spot. And you know what I did? I waited and waited and waited until I needed to make a move before I added it. I didn't cut my least valuable player because I don't know if he's ever going to come back. It's just a pure lottery ticket. And I know you invested a lot in Shane Bieber when you drafted him or traded for him, but right now, he's a lottery ticket. What are you doing with Trevor Bauer? That's a total lottery ticket in terms of fantasy. And all you can do is just go, maybe he comes back, maybe he doesn't. But I like to spend all of my roster spots available on guys who are currently producing. That's how you win games. It's sitting and waiting is the recipe for losses. And I just don't like to do that. You can do that in April. You can't do it in August.
One guy I think might be good to move on, and it may be a little too late at this point, is Amir Garrett is just absolute trash. And Heath Hembry is looking pretty good right now. Is that a player that you could probably add at this point?
I mean, there were so many closers or potential closers that happened this trade deadline that while I like Heath Hembry, I think he's probably long gone in most leagues. Like you said, we all know Amir Garrett, this is not his season. He is not the closer. Anyone else there is the closer. and they didn't add an arm at the deadline, so he very well might be the long-term closer, but it's probably going to be a rotation of guys. They've already kind of given saves out elsewhere. TJ Antone might come back eventually, and when he does, he's clearly the best arm in that pen, so maybe he becomes the save guy, a two-inning guy. There's potential. Maybe if Lucas Sims returns, there's a lot of influx, and I'd rather just kind of go elsewhere. In a lot of my leagues, I actually preemptively added David Bednar under the assumption that Richard Rodriguez might go. And when he went, I fell in love, and I'm super happy that I have him because I think he's going to lead me to some fantasy glory. So far, he hasn't gotten any saves, and he hasn't been pitching in closing situations, which has been rough. But you can also go add a guy like Cole Sluicer, or you can go add Tyler Clippard. There's plenty of saves available on your waiver wire right now, and specifically investing in someone like Heath Hembree over these other guys or spending a lot of your free agent budget on them, I just think that's kind of unwise because they're all replacement level. They're all kind of just adequate. So go get whoever costs the cheapest and, isn't already kind of part of a carousel. But, yeah, I don't see what's wrong with Heath Hembree. You can invest in him. That's fine.
Rich Rod, it seemed like I had him early on in the season and then traded him because it's so frustrating how few opportunities he actually got. And you go into that with that mindset that it's the Pirates. They're not going to win very many games, but at least they should be in some close games where he could get opportunities to get either a win or a save. And it seemed like maybe once a week he would get used.
Yeah, I mean, that's totally true, but he's also top 20 in saves in baseball right now. So it's kind of what baseball is, which is, he'd get used once a week and have one save opportunity to convert it. And that's kind of like a pretty good closer. It's weird. It's weird that that's the answer, but it's also kind of the answer. You've got your upper echelon pitchers, but name me closers who have been lights out this year. You've got Liam Hendricks, and they just added Craig Kimbrell, so he may have lost his job despite being lights out. You've got Craig Kimbrell, who may have also just lost his job. You got a guy like Mark Melanson, who it seems like the other shoe's always falling off, but it never actually does. And I kept waiting for the Padres to trade for Kimbrell, and they never did. So congrats. I guess that's a clear winner. You've got Alex Reyes, who has been great at converting saves and walking batters and turning those into a good ERA, which is not something to be expected, but it's happening. And then you've got Kenley Jansen, Edwin Diaz, Matt Barnes, a lot of the Raisel Iglesias. I'm starting to peter out here. Ryan Presley. I can barely find 10 guys to say are very good closers. So that's kind of what it is now. So that's why when the trading deadline comes and you have these 5 closers available on your waiver wire, just go add one of them. That's their actual production, despite when you look at them, you go, Tyler Clippard? The Diamondbacks don't win any baseball games. How is he going to get me saves? Well, he's going to win a few, and they're not going to blow anybody out. So he's going to get you some saves, and it's going to be weird because he's going to pitch 3 innings, and there are going to be 3 save opportunities, and he's going to blow one of them, and that's going to be good production for you, and you're going to be very confused by it, but that's what's going to happen.
Right. Well, and the thing with Rich Rod, though, he was the undisputed closer, too. If you look at a lot of these places that we're talking about, they're splitting those opportunities. So even when somebody is good and they're deserving of those opportunities, they are getting maybe an 8-inning job every once in a while or a tied game situation. With the Pirates, it was Rich Rod who was going to finish that game every time.
Yeah, exactly. And that's where you find value. If you know someone is the closer, there's just value in being that. Heck, you look at Cleveland. You got guys like James Karinchak and Emmanuel Clase. You know one of those 2 guys is going to close, and when they don't close, the other one's going to set up. And there's still a lot of value there. It's insane, but it's true. There's not even that much lost value when you have a guy splitting saves. So as much as I trash Heath Hembree for not clearly getting all the saves, he doesn't really lose that much value because if everyone's splitting saves, it's all relative. The only guys who aren't splitting saves are the elite guys, and you're never adding those people in season. There's no good ads in Reyes. He's like went into the season, so you could have got on him early. You've got maybe Jake McGee, who I guess didn't start necessarily as closer. Has Will Smith lost his closing job? I'm not sure. I guess Lou Trevino, that would have been a good find for somebody. And I guess Ian Kennedy before he just got traded. But, I'm talking about people with 15 saves right now. Those are the good finds. So if you find somebody to get you 6 saves, that's a lot of saves. It's not a little. So you got to remember it's what baseball currently is, and it's weird to think about how 4 years ago, if I was saying, yeah, I want a guy who's going to maybe pitch 3 times a week and maybe get 1 save situation out of that sounds very wrong. That sounds like a setup man, but that's an actual closer today, and you just have to deal with the real environments.
One thing you can bank on is a sponsor for tonight, Monkey Knife Fight. Monkey Knife Fight is a daily fantasy sports gaming website for the casual sports fan that is simple, fun, and easy to play. Users determine which superstars compete in the day's professional sporting events and will record more or less than the contested line provided. Monkey Knife Fight's daily fantasy prop games play similar to the salary cap-based DFS games, but without the algorithms, lineups, and most importantly, the sharks. There are several contests to choose from, none of which require hours of research required on competing sites. Start with the simple 2-on-2 or go for the highest payouts, 100 times and higher, by selecting the 8x8 more or less contest. Get started now with 100% instant match bonus of up to $50 with promo code FFSQC. And James, we kind of touched on it a little bit there when you're talking about Liam Hendriks and Craig Kimbrell being put together, probably 1 and 2 in terms of closers this year. Looking at what the White Sox have put together as far as the rotation and bullpen, is that the best pitching group in all of baseball?
I kind of don't want to say yes, but then I look elsewhere and I go, I guess that's the answer, because my first thought is the Mets, and then I go, that bullpen doesn't win any awards. Then I think of, oh, well, I love the Marlins. Let's look at the Marlins, and their bullpen definitely doesn't win any awards, and their whole staff's hurt, so I'm completely wrong there. Then I go, maybe Houston? And then I go, I guess maybe Houston? And then I look at the White Sox and I go, nah, I still want the White Sox. So, yeah, they are, and it's really weird to have a year where there's been so much dominant pitching, but then also there's not like one team that's just crushing it everywhere that you go, oh, this is the next Braves. Right. Like the White Sox look good. I'm not trying to trash them. They're my number 1 pick, but also I'm not like in love with them. Like Dallas Keuchel's a huge part of that team. He's not getting any younger, and he's not like that good.
He's a ground ball guy.
Right. You've got Kopech in the pen, who's obviously nice. You bring in Kimbrell, that obviously looks amazing. Hendricks is great. So that bullpen looks really good. It's better than having stupid Alex Colomé out there, who is just atrocious this season. But then you look at everyone else, you're like, okay, Dylan Cease, like, all right, he's a solid pitcher who sometimes does bad. Lucas Giolito, it's kind of the same thing. Yeah, Lance Lynn's good, but like, is Lance Lynn your best pitcher? Do I believe Carlos Rodon's just like amazing? No, I'm ready for the other shoe to fall off on him and have some bad starts. And I just named the whole rotation and their whole bullpen. Oh wait, I forgot Jose Ruiz. Like it's odd to see that and go, yeah, that's the best team. It's odd, but it's true.
Yeah, and Turpa's pitching out of his mind this year too, so that was a low key ad that I think is good for them.
Yeah, exactly. It's just odd because I feel like 1 year from now or 2 years from now, everyone on this White Sox team is going to be a worse pitcher. Like every single person, outside of maybe Michael Kopech and Garrett Crochet, every single one of them will be worse next year or the year after. That's a really weird thing to say about the best pitching team, but here we are.
Well, I think one of the weird things is if you go on like Baseball Reference and you start to look back at like guys who pitched in a World Series series, you look at some of those names after the top couple of guys, and once they get to game 3 and 4, you're like, oh my gosh, that guy pitched in a World Series and he is terrible.
Yeah, the inner Cleveland fan in me, I always think of that '07 team because we were up 3-1 on the Red Sox. We should have beat them, and we should have gone to the World Series. And to bring it full circle, we should have smacked Colorado in the face, made them forget and think about their rally cat. And we didn't do it, and it really stinks. And then, I don't know, 2009, I went back and I looked at that roster, and everyone on that team is bad. No one was good on that team, and I have no idea how they should have won the World Series. Their best hitter was Ryan Garco. Their best pitcher was CC Sabathia. Okay. Their next best guy was Fausto Carmona / Roberto Hernandez having the best season of his life. Cliff Lee was awful. And Joe Borowski was their closer. Like, how was that team like the team that should have won the World Series? Like, Trot Nixon led the team. The 90-year-old Trot Nixon. We brought in Kenny Lofton to be our best OPS plus in the playoffs. Like, it's absurd. But then you go, that's what happens. That's how you win the World Series. That's what the group of guys are. The '04 Red Sox or whatever they called, the dumb Cowboys or whatever Kevin Millar coined them now, which I don't care about or
like
remember.
The idiots or something, right? Yeah.
Yeah, the idiots. Well, they were just a bunch of guys who happened to do it. Like every year, a group of guys happen to win because someone does win. And the back half of those guys are usually just guys. I think about the 2016 Indians, and the last person to make it out in that World Series is possibly the worst position player in the history of baseball, Michael Martinez. He was on a World Series roster and made the most pivotal at bat of the entire year, where he made the final out. And he's like a career OPS of like 300 or something. He's horrendous, but he's the guy who was there, and that's what happens in baseball. There's always guys who are there because someone has to be there, and teams very rarely have a full starting set of stars. It's not how the game's built. And especially with the way the owners pay, they're not going to have teams like that anytime soon.
All right. Well, we didn't even get into Chris Bryant and Anthony Rizzo both being in different jerseys and hitting home runs. Is this just a dead cat bounce where them going to new teams is just a little bit of motivation to them to really shine it on the Cubs? Or is this them just making the best of the situation?
It's just making the best of the situation. It's, maybe motivation because, the Cubs traded me. They don't think I'm worth it. But all these guys, they know they're worth it, and they know no one's going to pay them. They know. It's not a world of ignorance. And they go, this is what the game is. You play, you become expensive, your team sells you. Why? Because they don't want to pay you. Then someone will maybe pay you in the offseason, but it's not as much. And that's the game. And Rizzo knows it. Bryant knows it. Baez knows it. Everybody knows it. And it's just sad. And baseball's stupid. And we have things like Kumar Rocker and everything else. And you just go, this is how the people who run baseball have intentionally set up baseball. And I think everyone just kind of resigned, including the players. And they go, well, I got to play baseball, so I'm going to do my best.
As somebody who does follow the Mets a little bit closer than most, what happened there?
I think best case scenario, they drafted him with all the intention of signing him. The MRIs and the medicals came back, and they really, truly did scare them. And they said, well, if we just don't sign this guy, we mitigate our risk and we just get the 11th pick next year, which is one slot lower, and we're going to get essentially the same value with a lot less risk if they truly believe that. And then the cynic in me goes, they never intended to sign this guy. They intended to send him back into the draft, use him personally as leverage to get basically the same pick and try and get him later in the draft, or try and avoid spending money this year to draft other guys and offer them larger bonuses later in the draft, or however they wanted to do it. And it was all just a play. And if I know anything about how multi-millionaires and billionaires operate, the likely outcome is it was a play and it was convoluted, and they wanted to screw Kumar Rocker because he was available to screw. And I'm not going to also sit here and go, well, the Mets, they're so evil because every other team is just kicking themselves for not thinking of it first. It's not like anyone cares. It's not like anyone at all in baseball cares about Kumar Rocker, who prior to this draft was considered the face of the draft and the next superstar in this draft. no one actually cares about it. And it's just a great way to point it out and say, yep, no one cares. The only people who care are the fans, and no one cares about the fans. They just care about those dollars, and it's weird. It's weird to just sit here and have it smack you in the face, and then the results of this are going to be absolutely nothing. Or, well, what are the players going to give in to have this not happen again at the negotiation table? Well, the players can only give in on so many things before they lose. And is this at the top of their priority list? Probably not, because they're concerned about themselves today, not about the future superstars. So it's just a disaster, like everything in baseball.
I just can't wait until the offseason when every MLB fan turns against the players and says that they're all greedy and they side with the owners who are billionaires, because that machine just keeps on chugging every single time. We're going to turn it around just that quickly.
It's a great way to end this podcast and having me go, I'm rooting so hard for a players' strike, for the players to get what they deserve. I love baseball, and I never want to ever have another season like 2020 or worse. But also, I absolutely want it to happen because I want the owners to lose and realize that they need to try and actually make baseball fun and entertaining. They don't care about doing that, and that's their actual job as the owner. Right now, they've just figured out a different way to bring in revenue. It used to be entertaining, and then fans come, and then you make money through ticket sales. Now it's have the longest product, sell the most ads, try and convince the fans that that's not what you're doing because that's not entertaining and they're here for entertainment. And if they could just somehow get a reality check, I would love it so much. But I also live in my reality, which is it's never
They're better at the PR game. What can you say? So
they've got more money.
Yep. Well, here's hoping that we have another really fun week of fantasy baseball up ahead. For me, I'm Chris Steele, joined by James Vecchio. We're all wishing you the best of luck as the fantasy postseason is right around the corner. So we'll talk to you all again real soon.